This is going to be my first part of my three-part review of the Texbo Real Thick Cowhide Leather Men's Shoulder Briefcase Fit 17-inch laptop bag tote compared to the Saddleback Classic Briefcase, the large size. As you can see, these bags are basically mirror images of each other in terms of design, though there is a significant price difference. It may seem a little bit unfair to do a head-to-head comparison of what is currently a $789 bag compared to what a bag that currently on Amazon is going for about $200. But given the design and the cross shoppers between the two bags, I think this is fairly even comparison between the two bags. It gives you an idea of what extra you get when you spend close to 4 times as much on a bag, and the value you get when you spend a quarter of the value of the bag and get a very similar leather bag. So, like my other comparison reviews, when I compared the old Texbo to the Saddleback, I decided to do this with the new Texbo. It appears that there have been some very slight design changes in the Texbo bag, so I think this is a perfect time for us to do a head-to-head comparison. So, starting at the beginning with the bag, like I always do, we'll start with the shoulder straps. So as you can see, Saddleback shoulder straps are extremely long, made of the same leather that the bag itself is made of, and made of very, very solid hardware here. The bag itself, in the shoulder straps, you can see it's 2 pieces of full thickness leather sewn together and some sort of foam padding in the middle holding it together, and there are 2 top straps. There is a buckle system with a bunch of belt holes for you to choose to adjust the size of the strap. The Texbo strap is a very similar design. It is 2 pieces of leather that you can see across here, full thickness, also sewn together with the same double stitching pattern that the Saddleback has, but without the foam padding in between. So you can see here, it's just 2 pieces of leather with strips sewn on top rather than with the foam padding in the middle. In terms of comfort, there is not a significant difference in comfort. I don't think the foam padding actually makes all that big of a difference. The leather itself actually offsets a lot of the weight of the bag. Saddleback and Texbo use this leather system with 2 rivets, and then Texbo uses the lobster claw clasps, while Saddleback uses the dog leash collars. It's kind of personal preference, what you enjoy, but the actuated movement of these dog leash versus the lobster claw, very similar. In terms of hardware, tell both are made of some sort of metal. It is fairly clear just from the heft of it that the hardware and the ends of these shoulder straps is a little bit tougher on the Texbo than it is, or I'm sorry, on the Saddleback than it is on the Texbo, but my previous Texbo one has held up to 2 years of really, really tough abuse, daily use, and a lot of flights, a lot of long car rides, being thrown places, and really just not being treated very nicely, and has held its own. So even though it's not as high quality, at least we know it stands the test of time, while the Saddleback, though appearing high quality, if you watch my other videos, you will see that after only 2 months of usage, you start to see breakdown and wear down in the metal itself. And based on Saddleback's response, this was purposeful in the design, which is something that I don't necessarily actually enjoy. I want a hardware piece to not have the shiny part of the chrome plating rub off after minimal usage, and that definitely does not rub off on the Texbo, but does so on the Saddleback. So very interesting. The other part of the straps that differ a little bit is on the Saddleback up here, there is a fixed piece holding the tongue in place, which means that if you make the strap too short, or if you make it too long, you have a piece hanging out that gets caught on things, or you have a piece that's too short that barely stays underneath. While on the Texbo, there is a movable leather holder that you can slide up and down depending on how far down you make the belt. And actually, in just 2 years, there has been a change in this design. This is a little bit thicker than the original one that I got on my old strap. So interesting They made it slightly thicker, but otherwise, exact same classic design that has held up well. So I don't see any reason why in this bag the same thing would not happen. Looking at the exterior of the bags, you have the same external belting system that can be taken off. These can be fully removed, as well as on the Texbo, you can do the exact same thing and fully remove those belts. I know not every single bag had that originally, but the Texbo design does incorporate that in. Additionally, the handle itself, the Saddleback, as you know, contains one piece of PVC piping in the middle that helps you get this larger grip on the handle. However, actually what ends up happening is if you wear a wedding ring, it ends up getting caught on this holder for the round clip. That doesn't happen when you use a bag without this PVC piping, such as the Saddleback or the Texbo, where you can just slide your hand in and out. However, it is a little bit more floppy and a little bit more loose, so comes with that compromise. The center strap on the Saddleback has a lot more holes than the Texbo has, which just has a simple 3 holes for you to choose from. Never run into an issue where I haven't been able to use all 3 of those holes to find the exact perfect strap for my bag, but there's the potential that the Saddleback could possibly hold more. Looking at the side of the bags, design between the 2 bags again is extremely similar, with the pocket in the back for you to hold your water bottles, umbrellas, or whatever else you use it for. On the Saddleback, that pocket is roughly 4.5 inches tall, and on the Texbo, that is roughly 5 inches tall. So slightly longer on the Texbo than the Saddleback, slightly higher, though they're both fairly small and restrictive in size, which means that if you go too large in terms of water bottle size, you actually can't get these to fit in. It does stretch a little bit over time, but doesn't stretch all that well. Externally, in terms of the hardware, you have the same 3D rings on the Saddleback that you see on the Texbo. The Texbo likewise has a system in which they are secured by 2 rivets and then sewn in place to hold this external rivet in place. The Saddleback uses single rivet over here, single rivet up here, and just sewn leather to hold the most used D-ring in place. Essentially very similar designs, not a high failure point given how reinforced it is in both these bags. Along the back of these bags, you have the pocket system. So pockets, roughly the exact same height, and as I've said and noted previously in the past, a full sheet of paper does not fit into either of these pockets. There is one primary differentiating point between these pockets, and that is, if looking at the Saddleback, the back of this pocket is just kind of the raw leather, and then the dark coffee brown leather on the other side, and this is actually kind of grippy. So when you put papers or newspapers or magazines in, what you find is as you're putting it in, the edges get creased and the papers get caught on this inside side with the raw leather, and it's really hard to have a crisp piece of paper go in and a crisp piece of paper come out. On the Texbo, on the other hand, they use this nylon reinforcement to kind of help hold everything in place. And I really like how it works. It makes it slide in and out a little bit smoother. You also see here that Saddleback uses one full piece of leather for that back cover, while Texbo splits it up and it's sewn together. It's the same quality leather on the top and bottom, however, it is 2 pieces sewn together. This has never failed on my previous bag, and no reason it's going to fail on a new bag. Looks like the exact same design. Looking at the bottom of the bags, Saddleback uses a full gusset design, one solid piece of leather that is sewn all the way across, while Texbo, on the other hand, splits it up and uses 3 separate pieces of leather. So you can see that sew line here. So there's 1 piece, 2nd piece, and 3rd piece, which is likely a cost-saving measure. You can't really see it unless you look really closely at the bag, and then you would have to actually flip the bag over. So in terms of overall aesthetics, it doesn't change anything. As I said before in my previous videos when I reviewed the Texbo bag, I think the carrying capacity of the bag cannot get high enough in which you worry about the tensile strength of the leather or the shear forces on the leather causing the bag to break. So even though it is an inherently weaker design, I do not believe that that weaker design leads you to a bag that is at higher risk of tearing. If anything, you're probably going to have other points in the bag fail before that bottom gusset is your point of failure. On the Texbo, you will see they use a similar ring for the backpack mode. However, instead of a circle, it is a modified D ring, while on the Saddleback it uses a full kind of round ring. Doesn't make a big difference. You can actually use it in either way. This is just as easy and comfortable as the Saddleback is, meaning that they're both equally uncomfortable. Other parts, the hardware on the Saddleback is clearly superior. You can tell just by kind of feeling it. It is better hardware. However, what is put on the Texbo is in no means bad hardware or worse hardware. I think, if anything, this is perfectly adequate to stand the test of time. And if you had gotten this hardware, your bag is going to fail before this hardware fails. This is still very, very solid pieces of metal. You can hear the clinking. This is not going to be the point of failure for this particular bag. In terms of stitching, one thing that's very interesting about what Texbo does compared to Saddleback is Saddleback very much uses similar color stitching as compared to the leather. So they don't have what I would call contrast stitching, where the stitching really stands out. Texbo does do that to some degree. You can kind of see here that the stitching is a different color than the leather, and it kind of pops out a little bit. And I really like that look. I think that looks extremely beautiful. There have been some comments about the Saddleback stitching fraying and the Texbo stitching frays as well. I will say between the two bags, I actually had more of a fraying issue with my particular Saddleback. If you watch my other videos, I talk about that, as compared to my Texbo, which actually didn't even really start fraying until about a year into its use. And when it did, it was really easy to take care of. Externally, if we look at the thickness of the leather, you can see here that the Texbo isn't exactly, that much of a budget brand. I mean, it is fairly thick leather. So it is still very beautifully stitched together, very nicely done with stitches in place, and fairly thick leather that, if you look here, is pretty stiff. Saddleback, very similar. If anything, a little bit of a softer leather, but extremely, extremely thick leather. Interestingly, the leather, when you first get it, the looks of it looks way better on the Texbo than it does on Saddleback. Saddleback just has this really plasticky look to its leather that makes it look kind of fake and glossy. However, the Texbo does not have that. When you first get it, the leather has that raw feeling to it. It's almost as if this is a dark color bag, except the leather has the tobacco feel of Saddleback, which is a very interesting combination, and I absolutely love it. And if I grab my old Texbo bag and put it next to the new Texbo bag, you will see that this leather actually ages extremely well. If you look at this back panel here, look at what changes in that coloration. It builds a nice little patina. And you will read online in comments that this leather is not good leather. Granted, that is very much the case. At $200, you are not going to get the same quality leather that you will get with Saddleback or other full thickness Cowhide leathers. However, this leather is no chump. It still delivers a beautiful patina and an aging quality that you see over time, that you also see in high-end bags. So if you look here, you can see color differences that appear throughout. I mean, it's really, really nice. And at $200, it's an absolute bargain. So, overall impressions on the outside of the bag. Texbo essentially used Saddleback's design. They copied it, they took it, and they made it their own. They made a few adjustments. They had several cost-saving measures. You will see that they used less rivets. that their hardware's not as good, and that they save a little bit on the leather and stitching, that they stitch together 2 pieces of leather along the back, as well as 3 pieces of leather for each bottom gusset. If that's what it takes to get a bag that's a quarter of the price, that's the exact same size as Saddleback, holds up just as well, and you can replace 3 times over before you even get close to the cost of a Saddleback, I'd say that that is actually pretty fair compromise. So depending on what you want, looking at the exterior dimensions, if what you really just care about is the look of the bag, and you want one that functions well, and you aren't a leatherhead and really just want beautiful, amazing, thick, high quality leather, if you're okay making some compromises on your leather, this does the job, looks just as nice, and it's going to hold up to the test of time. I mean, my old bag is 2 years old, has been beat up, frozen in the back of a car, put in 100-degree heat, and is still going strong. I mean, this bag still looks great. So if this is what an old 2-year-old heavily used bag looks like, this is what a brand new bag looks like, I mean, you're basically going to be able to use this design for a really long time without any failures. Stay tuned for my second video where I compare the interiors and the pockets of the bags.